Okay. Okay, so tell me how well, you can't tell me, but how is France different from Britain? Well, when you think when so we can think about British political development as both moderate and evolutionary. When we think of French political development, you can think of it as conflictual and revolutionary. Right? So their political development is actually very, very different. Right? Whereas Britain is a parliamentary system, France has a mixed presidential parliamentary system. Right? The system of what we call the dual executive. The president is the head of state with real decision-making powers, and the prime minister is the head of government with overlapping powers. The president selects the prime minister, but the National Assembly majority may reject the president's choice in a vote of censure. The Constitution of the Fifth Republic, which we talked about before in class, the Fifth Republic, which we're still in now. This was designed in 1958 under Charles de Gaulle with the aim of providing France with greater political stability than under the previous Fourth Republic. Okay. Ethnic diversity, and what we've seen on the news, right? France has Europe's largest Muslim minority, and you know that the second generation is very troubled in that country, and this often results, unfortunately, sometimes in incidents of political unrest, violence, as well as terrorism. The French presidential elections take place in 2 rounds. Right? As many candidates as they want, may run in the first round. And if one of the candidates wins an absolute majority of votes, more than 50%, then that person wins the presidency. If no one wins an absolute majority, then a second round takes place. Right? And this actually rarely happens. Round 2 takes place 2 weeks later in a runoff election between the two top finishers of round 1. Right? And so these 2 rounds of voting, there was a similarity with Britain as well as the United States. They both used the single-member district plurality method. Right? Same thing for the presidential elections as well as the National Assembly elections. The book mentions this term, cohabitation. You probably can't see that, but we're trying our best. Cohabitation, what is that? So this is France's version of what we call divided government. That means the president is of one party, and a legislative majority and the prime minister is of the rival party. Right? So you know what that means. It's difficult to get things done. It can be. Okay? So let's talk a bit about France's political development. Right? So again, unlike Britain, the assertion of world dominance in France was accompanied by the absence of an assertive national parliament. Britain had an assertive national parliament from early on. France did not. Before the French Revolution of 1789, France had a long tradition of centralized absolute monarchy, right, and a weak parliamentary tradition, just the opposite of British political development. The revolution begins in 1789 as the States General of France's young national parliament is convened. And this was the first attempt by the French monarchy to address the population as a whole, rather than just the aristocrats and the priestly elites. And the Third Estate gets Louis XVI to approve a constitutional monarchy. What was the States General and the first, second, and third estates? The States General was the young national parliament, and the first estate referred to the nobility. The second estate referred to the Roman Catholic priesthood or the clergy, and the third estate was the general population, but really this refers to the middle class. All right. So the Great Ordinance of 1357 establishes the constitutional monarchy. When Britain's Magna Carta is establishing a constitutional monarchy. But this didn't last, as the French monarchs didn't favor this arrangement and called the estates general less and less. By the time of the States General of 1789, the calls for more democratic representation had been suppressed for so long that when given the opportunity, it exploded. What was the battle cry of the French Revolution? I think you all know this. Liberty, equality, fraternity. The causes of the revolution are varied, right? Of course, there were centuries of royal absolutism, or royal authoritarianism. There's no parliamentary representation. You have a disaffected nobility, an unfair tax system, and rural poverty. The 1789 States General was the first to be called in 175 years, a very long time. France's first constitution, whose preamble, the Declaration of the Rights of Man, enshrined private property, along with resistance to oppression and citizen participation in the law, and they established these things as fundamental rights. Citizenship and the right to vote was given to males 25 years and over. The radicals, also known as the Jacobins, they were organized into political clubs, and they wanted to abolish the monarchy and begin a republic. They gained power, and they declare a republic in 1792, and the king and aristocrats are executed. Right? So you know what a republic is. A republic is a form of government without a monarch. So do we live in a republic in the United States? Yes, we do. So after the king was executed, this set forth what is called the Terror in the 1790s, and in which some 20,000 quote-unquote enemies of the people were executed. Dictatorship, civil war, external aggression ensued. The power of the Jacobin central government and its dictatorial rule, this is all intensified in its Committee for Public Safety. And this led to the term Jacobism. Jacobism, what is that? It refers to highly centralized government. The tradition of highly centralized government continued even with more moderate factions that took power in 1794, perhaps in keeping with France's monarchical traditions and unitary state. So unlike Britain, the elimination of royal absolutism did not lead to democracy in France, but it led to other forms of centralized power. Okay, so I'm going to give you just some key points, a few more key points in France's political development, and we'll talk a little bit about the state institutions, and I think that will be about it. So from 1799 to 1814, Napoleon Bonaparte staged a coup in 1799 with the help of the French military, and ended the decade of revolution. He crowns himself emperor in 1804, and he rules by dictatorship. He had a secret police, but also organized plebiscites to cultivate popular support for his dictatorship. His authoritarian rule lasted until 1814, when his army was defeated by an alliance of European powers. Between 1850 and 1830, you get the restoration of sovereign monarchy. Between 1830 and 1848, another constitutional monarchy. 1848 to 1850, worker insurrections destroyed the July monarchy. And a second republic is established by Louis Napoleon, sometimes called Napoleon III, because his uncle the second, because his uncle was Louis Napoleon. There's a new period of authoritarian rule that reasserts the state's undisputed authority. So there's another military coup, and a second empire between 1851 and 1870. 1870 to 1940, you get the Third Republic, and this is a period of democracy. But there's a power vacuum filled by people committed to democracy. A new constitution is made in 1875. The parliamentary system expanded male suffrage, fostered the growth of political parties, and guaranteed civil rights and freedoms. This is the longest run of any regime since the French Revolution, but it suffers from instability. Between 1870 and 1940, you get 108 different governments, and this ends with Nazi occupation. Between 1940 and 1944, the Nazis occupy, and there's a regime, a puppet regime, that is called Vichy France, from 1940 to 1942. Germany disbands the Vichy government, and then just takes control of France proper. Between 1944 to 1946, U.S. and British forces drive out the Germans, and there's a provisional government under the General Charles de Gaulle. If you fly into the airport, it still says it's Charles de Gaulle Airport. And so they install de Gaulle as chief of the provisional government, and he draws up a new constitution. Between 1946 and 1958, there's a Fourth Republic. You have parliamentary government with a ceremonial presidency, but these governments are very, very unstable, in part due to the electoral system. And at that time, the French were confronting their colonial problems in Algeria, much like we did with Vietnam. And so the National Assembly conferred power on Charles de Gaulle to reorganize the state under a constitution, and this gives rise to the Fifth Republic. And the Fifth Republic is what we are still in France, from 1958 to the present. The Fifth Republic establishes a presidential parliamentary system, as we said before, the system of the dual executive, and this was approved in a referendum in 1958. So what's my key point here? There's been considerable constitutional instability and 4 unstable republics. French political history is marked by turbulent constitutional development, unstable government, and a tradition of centralized state authority. Right? So when we think of France, think of a conflictual and revolutionary path to democracy, unlike Britain's gradual and moderate path to democracy. And those result in different outcomes.